Latino, why this is so, I don't know. I'd like to see the study that kind of says why this is so, but the Latino youths were less likely to be identified as suicidal. But then the Latino girls were considered the highest, you know, the highest rate of expressing that they had suicidal plans. So that says to me that maybe the numbers are even higher, right? But why were they not, I don't know. You know, I can only speculate. What would you guys say? Why they're not considered, why they're not less likely to be identified as suicidal? Are they maybe scared to say, right? Or because of the stigma again? Or it's just not something that's used in the, you know, it's not used as an expression. You know, I just feel like killing myself sometimes is used by kids even when they don't feel like it, right? But that's not an expression that in Spanish is used very, very often.
I think sometimes parents see their child as maybe being dramatic.
Good, I'm glad you guys said it and not myself. But I think there is that concept, that there's some drama behind the word suicide. Oh, they're just wanting attention. They're just trying to, you know, again, trying to get attention. They're being dramatic. It's not that bad, right? Especially if it's a family that's gone through a lot of things. They'll go, well, what, they can't be suicidal. They haven't lived the things that we lived, right? And if I never got there, why are they going to get there? Again, that's education, right? But it happens, and you hear it in the office a lot. They have nothing to be sad about. What are they worried? You know, why are they suicidal? So sometimes maybe it's not taken seriously. Okay. We mentioned that Latinos in general, and this is not only the adolescent, this is actually, I think it comes more from the adults, right? That they seek out primary care physicians, right? But they seek out first family or their support system. So it's very difficult for a Latino to say, I think I've got a problem. I think I'm depressed, right? Actually, when you look at the way that Latinos express depression, it has nothing to do with the emotion. It has to do with pain. And when you have a Latino expressing depression, they will say, it hurts here, and it hurts here, and my muscles tense here, and I can't sleep very well. And the first 15 minutes of the interview, they are not once saying what they're feeling. It's all about kind of what, and I mean emotionally feeling, it's what their body feels, right? And the adolescents, I would say, not because the study says it, but more clinical experience, it's about the same. Right? I can't run as fast, I can't pay attention as much, but let's not talk about the fact that I'm crying more, I get my feelings hurt. Any of those things are never mentioned until you really ask about them, right? So a lot of these individuals are not diagnosed because they're not saying, I'm depressed and I'm sad. Okay? Yes?
I had a comment real quick. I think especially with Hispanic families, I know I grew up in one and I know it was the same for our cousins. They consider, or we consider it to be like it's a family matter. You don't go and talk to other people. We're gonna deal with it at the house. You don't tell anybody anything. We resolve it here. And the thing I'm hearing a lot with the girls, I have girls groups and they say, oh miss, I have to go to anger management. It's always anger management. It's never, but then when you start doing like an exercise on suicide and depression, you think, wow, they really don't, it's not really anger management. They're just angry all the time because they hold everything like inside all the time.
Yes.
So they have a lot of, I mean, it's not, they're not able to share it.
Right.
And when we look at depression in adolescents, it is different than depression in adults, right? And depression in adolescents, it's not about the sadness, it's about the anger and the irritability, right? So then on top of that, add on that that anger is much more powerful than being sad, right? You feel kind of less, I guess, less vulnerable if you say, I get angry and I want to fight, then I'm sad and I just want to stay at home and lock myself in a closet, right? So kids tend to express it more in the anger. Excuse me one second. Yes, sir.
I wanted to ask, why do you suppose that adults and adolescents both refer more to their physical pain than their emotional pain? Do you have any idea why you do that?
I don't have I think in general the idea, it's because it's safer to say that.
It's safer?
Yes, it's safer because it's something that you can identify, right? When you say the word sad, right? Sad is a very general word for people. There's almost like a sense of, if I say what hurts specifically and this is my trigger, then it can be addressed. But it's very abstract, the word sad. But a specific pain is much more concrete, right? And yes. No, go ahead.
Now I was going to say, could it also indicate that the person doesn't really know how to identify, or if they don't know how to identify, how can they express?
Yes, that's also the case. That's also the case. But see, it's very interesting because, again, on a personal note, I would say from personal experience that as Latinos, or Hispanics, we're very able to identify other people's emotions. Oh, they're sad, they're depressed, they're just this, they're just that kind of thing. But when it comes to the personal expression of emotion, it is limited. And then we're not even talking about gender. I mean, gender is a Latino male is going to be much less open to expressing themselves in a vulnerable way than the Latino woman. Let's see, immigrant parents having limited knowledge of the system. That's a big deal. I mean, we have issues with individuals that have grown up here in San Antonio that just don't know. And even we have limited knowledge of every single, resource that's out there, right? But the process of getting into the mental health system is difficult. So the mentality is, there's a problem, I'm going to see the doctor, right? And who's the doctor? The primary care physician, right? It's not the psychiatrist, it's not anyone else, it's just let me see the doctor, right? But there's not that knowledge about how do you get in to see a psychiatrist, or how do I get in to see a therapist? We take it for granted because we are the psychiatrist or the therapist, but for the community, it still is a very big challenge. And then how frustrating when you make an appointment, or you try to make an appointment and they say, well, there's no availability for 3 months. Well, in 3 months, I'm over it, right? So why even make the appointment? And that's kind of it's the frustration. And that frustration is on both ends, but obviously more for the person that's experiencing it, and for the parents that need the problem solved now, right? The other thing is that we tend to, in general, I believe, when the knowledge is limited, to use emergency rooms, right? But the emergency rooms don't set up your follow-up appointments. They take care of the crisis at that moment. So if you're going to be admitted, you're going to get follow-up care. If you don't get admitted, you're not going to get follow-up care from an emergency room. So maybe those are other places that we need to target a little bit more, are providing information. Language barriers, we kind of talked about that already, the language barrier, especially maybe for the parents that learned their Spanish as their primary language. They don't speak the English very well. And so it's not only about expressing their own emotions with the counselors and the therapists and the psychiatrists, but basically being able to communicate with their kids. I mean, you see now generations where the parents have difficulty communicating with the kids because the kids are primary English speaking, right? They really haven't learned the expressions, and they don't even want to speak Spanish, right? And the parents are really not interested in learning too much of the English. So we see that a lot in the office. So it's the language barrier, not with the caregiver or the mental health worker, but amongst the kids and the parents.
Yes. I was kind of think that with the media that we have now, I know if you watch news, national news, half the commercials for both lives all the time. I mean, and so I think that for some families, being able to see it in the media and say, oh, I'm going to identify with that. And there isn't anything like in the Spanish language television station talking about real lives.
That's true. That's true.
And I have some issues with the advertisement also, because they really don't, you have a very short time to say something about a medication, but it really doesn't, one, address the issue, right? And then the way they present the side effects freaks everyone out, right? And then you can have this and this and this. Oh, the comment was with all the media and advertisement, right? For example, about pharmaceuticals, that there really aren't any in Spanish. When you listen to the Spanish-speaking channels, you don't have that education out there. So when some individuals come in, they go, oh yeah, the little smiley face of the Zoloft or the Cymbalta, and the kids kind of heard those, but in the Spanish-speaking population, not because, like you said, it's not on the TV.
Yes.
You mentioned the side effects that are riddled off, and there's like, a lot of them.
Yes.
And when teens hear those commercials, they laugh and they say, why would you take medication that has so many problems attached to it than medication?
Mm-hmm.
And when you ask teens about suicide, they'll say, well, everybody thinks about suicide sometimes, and everybody says, I'm going to kill myself sometimes. And if you get them talking about it, you can help them distinguish the difference between, like you're saying, slang and just using expressions, cultural expressions like I want to die or I'm going to kill myself. And kids who seriously, repeatedly show hopelessness and despair underlying, still trying to fit in and cool among their group, because the kids who are sensitive to each other, and they're entering the truth. And when they're among adults, they're wanting to present themselves as I'm handling my life, I'm right.
That's true. That's a good comment.
So what can happen is that when kids, and this is from your comment, when kids or adults are talking about, well, when they see the advertisements, for example, right, they make the comment about, why would I even want to take this medication if I have to deal with all these side effects, right? So yes, they're getting information, but it's not information that's complete, and you're expecting a teenager to really handle that, right? The other thing is, when you ask, like you commented, when you ask a teenager about suicide, they go, well, everyone thinks about that. We have to be careful with that concept of everyone and everything in teenagers, because every teenager thinks that everyone else thinks the way they do, right? So that means that when you ask a teenager that's used marijuana, right, what do you think? How many people use marijuana? They'll say, oh, well, everyone's done it, right? Well, maybe it's because everyone that you're hanging out with does it, right? But that doesn't mean it's the general population. And the same thing with kids when they think about suicide attempts. Thinking about suicide is very different than thinking about killing yourself, right? About a suicidal ideation that we call it. We can talk about suicide as a general concept. I think pretty much all teenagers at this point have talked about suicide or mentioned it in one way or another. Not on a personal level, but they know the word, right? So I think that statement is true. But when a kiddo has started to think about suicide in the sense of a plan, those individuals that are depressed tend to migrate towards other individuals that they feel support and empathy from. So they might have had that experience already, and it makes it seem like everyone does it. Like the kiddos that are self-injurious tend to feel that everyone's done it, right? The minority are the ones that haven't. And those are things that we need to address also, because that's a skewed concept, very skewed concept. Okay. Insurance. We won't go into too much detail on that, but the Hispanic population, uninsured kids, is about 27.7. That's a lot, right? So fine, you want to go see the doctor, but I can't see the doctor because I don't have any insurance, right? And there has to be some level of insurance. Sure, there's the Center for Healthcare Services that take individuals that don't have insurance. There's a long waiting list to get in there, right? And then there's a ranking on the severity of the symptoms to be able to get attention as well. So are they uninsured because they're Latinos necessarily? No, I mean, there's also a lack of knowledge, being scared to get, or not even knowing how to get insurance, right? Hopefully that'll change with all this talk about insurance and supposed accessibility to insurance, but that is a big, big issue in the Hispanic population as well.